makes this an old growth forest is the landscape. It's very bumpy. There's a lot of hills and divots in the land, which makes it hard to clear for agriculture. So it's never actually been cleared. Because it's such an old forest, that makes it a pretty special habitat. Special habitat for lots of animals, and also for a lot of species of plants as well. And today we're going to be talking about some different wildflowers, spring wildflowers that we'll find in forests just like this. And to complement our video today, we actually have one of our biodiversity sheets. So this is our spring wildflower biodiversity sheet. You can order these and others on the Arboretum website, but it has a bunch of common spring wildflowers that we're going to try and see if we can find here at the Arboretum today, which will be lots of fun because it's a perfect time for them. And you know what? I think our first plant is actually right close to me. So why don't we have just a little walk down over here? And we can probably match this to something.
Let's take a look at the sheet. So we're looking for something that matches this flower.
I think Bloodroot's a pretty good match.
Yeah.
So this is Bloodroot, and it's a pretty cool plant. So a lot of people lump Bloodroot in with these spring ephemerals. And when we're talking about spring ephemerals, it's good to know what that means. A spring ephemeral is basically a flower that comes up in the spring for a few weeks and disappears for the rest of the summer. So they're a really early blooming flower. They take advantage of the sun that hits the ground early in the year before all that sun is shaded up by the canopy of the forest before that comes in. And then once the shade comes in, they die off and then they kind of disappear. So Bloodroot is very commonly lumped together with the spring ephemerals. Though funnily enough, they're not a true spring ephemeral. Even though the flowers do die back like normal spring ephemerals, the leaves actually stick around for the rest of the summer and they get bigger. So they're not technically a true spring ephemeral, but they are a very early blooming spring wildflower and usually lumped together with the spring ephemerals. And they're a really awesome plant. Not only are they very pretty, so they have these nice white flowers with these lobed leaves, but they're a pretty unique species as well. They're actually the only species in its whole genus, Sanguinaria, which refers to its common name as well, Bloodroot. And they're called that because they actually have a sap that's kind of red and bloody. So I'm going to tear off a little bit of a leaf here. We won't tear off too much because we don't want to hurt the plant. But you see the sap is this red, bloody juice. And that's where it gets its name from. So that's why it's called Bloodroot. And in a couple of weeks, as the flowers die back, like I said, the leaves will stick around for the rest of the year and they'll get bigger and bigger. And they're pretty good, common spring wildflower to keep an eye out for if you're ever in this part of woods or some other woods. So they're a nice one to start off with. Bloodroot checked off the list.
Nice.
But you know what? I bet there's probably lots of other flowers around as well. It's not just all Bloodroot. So why don't we have a quick walk around and see what else we can find? And you know what? Right off the bat, I actually spotted another one right here. So this nice bright yellow flower stands out pretty well against the green and brown of the leaf litter and other leaves. So let's see if we can match this up to.
Okay, so I think it's a pretty good match for trout lily right here.
Yeah.
Those drooping flowers, bright yellow.
You're exactly right. So this is a trout lily flower. And you know, right off the bat, we can pretty much see why the common name is trout lily. If you look at the pattern of its leaves, see it's all nice and splotchy, kind of like the pattern of the skin of a trout. So that's why the common name for these guys is trout lily. And they're pretty cool because you can see there's a bunch of trout lily leaves here, but not flowers for every leaf. And that's because this plant actually depends mostly on spreading underground to grow new plants. So they kind of are connected underground by their root system and they pop up as new kind of individual little plants. Another leaf over here. And it takes a couple of years for each plant to kind of reach maturity and be able to grow into a flower. So some of these plants where they only have one leaf, like this one over here, they're actually not fully mature yet, so they're not going to grow a flower. Whereas if you see one of two leaves, these are mature, and these are the ones that are going to be flowering. And these dispersal mechanism of the seeds. Once those seeds are fertilized and ready to kind of be spread, they actually depend on ants to spread those seeds. So each seed has a little structure connected to them. It's called an Alaia, and it's kind of this packet of nutrients. And ants come along, they see that, and they go, well, I want to eat that. So they take that along with the seed attached and bring it back over to their colony, and they bring it down into their colony underground, and over there the seeds get basically planted by these ants in this nice rich nutrient dense soil. So that's kind of how they depend on other animals to disperse their seeds, which is pretty interesting. Funnily enough, it's actually not just Trent lily that depends on the ants for seed dispersal. The bloodroot will also use ants to help disperse their seeds as well. So two kind of interesting plants right next to each other with some similar adaptations. Kind of nice. So 2 off the list so far. We haven't even walked that far yet, so that's pretty awesome. Looks like there's lots of wildflowers around.
Yeah, Victoria Woods is a pretty awesome place for that.
I think I see another one over here. So this one is pretty. So there's 2 here. This one we've already met, so this is the bloodroot from a little bit earlier. But this one is kind of new. This is not quite flowering yet, so it might be tricky to match it up, but you can do actually based off color.
I think a lot of those ones on that sheet here are white, except for this one right here.
Yep.
Blue cohosh.
Yeah, so this is blue cohosh. It hasn't quite flowered yet. Hopefully in a couple of weeks it will do so, and maybe we'll visit it sometime in the future. You guys, if you're around, you can visit it too and see if it's flowered yet. And it'll grow these tiny little kind of green blue flowers. But it's called blue cohosh because the rest of the plant, like the stem and the leaves here, are also this kind of funny blue-green color. So they're a pretty interesting, funky-looking plant. I like them. That's pretty awesome. You know what? We barely started walking up Victoria Woods, but there's so many more flowers left to find. So actually, why don't I pass it off to Kitty and see if there's any other flowers that we can see around. All right, I'm going to take the biodiversity sheet with me as well to help me figure out what I'm looking at, and we'll keep walking down. I know I found something cool here earlier.
We'll help you look too. Our eyes are peeled.
We'll go another path here because I know there is a flower here I wanted to show you. Oh, it's right here. All right. So this little guy was a little bit hidden at first, but you see this has a tiny white flowers that are kind of gone now, but the leaves are also very distinctive. We've got these fuzzy looking stems. And we could again take a look at our biodiversity sheet to try and figure out what we're taking a look at here. So what do you think? Is there anything that matches? Let's have a look. Well, the petals left on these flowers look a little bit like this, I think.
Yeah.
The hepatica, sharp-lobed hepatica.
Yeah, so it is a little bit trickier to tell this ID, but this is sharp-lobed hepatica. You can tell with the remaining petals on this flower, they have the same lobe-shaped petals, but this is actually a really, really cool flower because it's called sharp-lobed hepatica for a good reason. If you take a good close look at these leaves here, they look a little bit like lobes of the human liver. That's actually why they call it sharp-lobed hepatica. The hepatica part means liver. And that means back in the day, many years ago, people saw this plant and thought because the leaves looked like lobes of liver, it can actually be used to help cure liver ailments. Of course, there is actually no benefits to sharp lobe hepatica as a medicine that we have discovered as of yet, but that's actually why this called sharp lobe hepatica, which is really cool. And if you see this plant out in the wild, sometimes the flowers can be kind of tricky because they are actually very variable in color. They can be pink, they could be white, they could be all sorts of shade in between. So one of the best things to look out for is the shape of the flower, the remaining petals here. It's got these fuzzy stems like this. And of course, the very distinctive liver-shaped leaves. Those are the best things to look out for if you want to find sharp lobe hepatica. Very, very cool little plants. I'm glad we were able to find this little one. All right, now we're gonna go a little ways into the forest here and look for another flower that I think a lot of people will be a big fan of, so follow me. Flower there, although it doesn't have any flowers yet. This is another plant that we can figure out. I don't know if we can figure out by the leaves on this sheet, but we can take a look. This one we might have to give to you guys, and we'll show you the flowers on the sheet. Yeah, so this is called early meadow rue. Let me see if we can find the flowers out for you here.
Oh, here it is.
There it is. Okay, so it's it's close to flowering here, but not quite yet. It has these nice little yellow droopy flowers. But you could tell early meadow rue by the leaves. So they have very distinct leaves. They're compound leaves divided into parts of 3 like this, which is kind of neat. So early meadow rue, another good one. Oh, and there's little flowers right over here. Perfect. Very nice. All right, that wasn't what I came to show you guys. This is a fun surprise for sure, but we're gonna keep on going. All right, so we are here at a beautiful patch of Trillium.
Look at all the green.
Yeah. Now, I think most people recognize Trilliums right away, but if we pick out maybe this white Trillium to look at here, this is recognizable, of course. We can again use our sheets here. So Trillium right there. And you can recognize Trilliums because, of course, they have 3 petals. They have 3 sepals, this part here. They have 3 petals, and they also have 3-part seed pods. So all sorts of 3s in this plant. That's why they're called the Trillium plants. And white Trillium is of special importance here to us because they are the provincial flower of Ontario. So this is a really, really awesome one to see here. Now, of course, as a provincial flower, it is protected, so you can't go out into the forest and just pick any random old Trillium to take home. And you don't want to be doing that to these plants either because these are spring ephemerals, which means that in the early spring season, they're going to pop up, they're going to flower, and then they're gone for the rest of the year. So they're only here for a very short amount of time. And during that very short amount of time, they need to use everything they've got to gather as much sunlight and water and food as possible, because for the rest of the year, they need to rely on that food to survive underground dormant until they come up again next year. So if you pick a flower like this, a Trillium or any other spring ephemeral out of the ground, what happens is you are taking away its ability to gather energy during this critical part of the year and their life. So they can actually really seriously injure the plant or sometimes even kill it. So we never want to pick any of these flowers, but if you do see them, you can enjoy them. They are a very beautiful flower.
And if you look very closely, I did see some earlier today, but there were a lot of pollinators around. There are lots of bees flying around, honeybees flying around these flowers, and some other pollinators as well. And like white trillium, a lot of plants use their color and their smell to attract pollinators to help them reproduce. What happens is things like bees and wasps and moths and butterflies and hummingbirds, all sorts of pollinators like that, they'll come to these fun flowers. They usually have bright, fun colors to help attract these animals, and also are quite sweet smelling to attract these animals. And they'll actually come to the flower, they'll maybe snack a little bit on the nectar, and then they're going to get covered in pollen and go to another flower. And in that process, they're actually going to help pollinate these plants. So that's why it's so important for plants like this to help attract pollinators by being super brightly colored with a very, very nice smell. But of course, there is another plant here, another trillium here, that uses a bit of a different strategy. So very closely planted near the white trillium, we have some examples of the lovely red trillium. Here's some nice ones over here. Yeah, I love these ones. I think their color is just spectacular. So this is the red trillium. Again, we have the 3 leaves, 3 sepals, and 3 petals like all trilliums do. You'll notice though the leaves on this red trillium are much broader than on the white trillium. So this is a red trillium leaf, and if we go over here, so these are white trillium leaves. And the leaves on the red trillium are much broader, so you don't have to wait for the flowers to come up to identify them. Now, of course, with the red trillium, it wants to be pollinated during this time just as much as the white trillium does, and just as much as all the other flowers we've seen so far do. Except it caters to a different type of clientele though, because instead of attracting things like honeybees and wasps and moths and butterflies, all those usual animals that you associate with pollinating insects, it wants to attract a different type of insect altogether. And to do this, it uses a different strategy. We talked a little bit about how different flowers may smell really sweet or be very brightly colored, like maybe the bright white trillium or the bright yellow trout lilies. But this has a very dark color. It's dark red, almost like rotting flesh maybe. And if you take a good deep sniff of this red trillium, you may find that it doesn't quite smell that sweet. In fact, the red trillium has a very pungent smell, and that is to help attract all sort of different pollinator all together, and that is the carrion-eating flies. They smell really bad, kind of like rotting flesh, and have this deep purplish red color like rotting flesh, and hopefully that attracts flies to the flower, landing in hopes of a delicious snack. And when it lands, its body's gonna get covered in pollen, and as it flies to another flower, it's gonna help pollinate that flower. So this is how the red trillium uses the bright red color and the smell to help attract a very different sort of pollinator than the other plants that we've seen so far, which is pretty cool. Not a lot of people know. So next time you see red trillium, give it a sniff and see if it smells as sweet as some of the other flowers that you might see hanging around. Probably not, but we still recommend it for science. For science, you gotta do it for science. They're a pretty awesome flower. I like them a lot. Now that brings us to the end of our little wildflower tour here in Victoria Woods. I hope you guys really enjoy hanging out with us. Of course, if you want to help protect land like this and protect species like this that live in our amazing world, one of the things that you can do would be to, if you're out on your next walk and you see a flower like this, is to not pick them. We talked a little bit about that with the white trillium, but you never want to pick these flowers out of the ground because we don't want to hurt these plants and these species. But one of the best things that we can do and you can do, that what you're doing right now, is to learn a little bit more about them, because as we learn more about these plants and these animals that share our planet with us, the more we want to help protect them and appreciate them, which is pretty awesome. So thank you so much for hanging out with us and learning about these wonderful wildflowers with us, and we'll see you next week. Bye. Bye.